You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. This is Making Tracks. Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
That's not true. That's impossible.
You're listening to Making Tracks, the first episode of 2023, and a very special episode as we swing back to late 2022 and the Bad Batch Roundtable, which featured guests including D. Bradley Baker, the voice of the Bad Batch, Jennifer Corbett, head writer and executive producer, Brad Rau, supervising director and executive producer, and Michelle Ang, the voice of Omega. Fantha Tracks are fortunate enough to be part of the D. Bradley Baker interview and had questions posed in the other two roundtables, so let's head back to late 2022 and the Season 2 Bad Batch Roundtable with Jennifer Corbett, Brad Rau, D. Bradley Baker and Michelle Ang.
We're going to start off with Mark. You have the first question.
Hello, D.
Hey, Mark.
How keen or not keen are you to take on new clone voices? And I ask that because it's always recognisably the same guy, but presumably there's only so many ways you can do the same guy. Do you relish taking on another iteration of that character, or do you sometimes think, oh, what am I going to do?
I always think, what am I going to do? And then, and then we nail in something that gives this new clone character something unique. And sometimes it's an image, sometimes it's an adjective or two. But you can always add something that's a different flavor of angle on any of them, just to keep them all separate and to establish something of the character of each of these, because they're not generic. That's the key, is these guys are not generic. And they all have a different age, a different kind of experience, a different attitude towards problem solving. And so I think we can keep going. And in season 2 we do that. There's some really interesting characters coming up. Mayday, where it's like there's new, fresh, interesting guys that it's like, yes, they're clones, but this feels like a new guy, a new character.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, and now we're going to go to Sarah with Fangirls Going Rogue.
Hello, Dee. So excited to talk with you today.
Hey, Sarah. How's it going?
Hi. I'm doing great. And I just had a question for you. Now, which member of Clone Force 99 are you easily able to slip into, and which takes just a little more work?
Well, the most amount of work is Wrecker. He's also the most amount of fun. But vocally speaking, it's a lot more vocal heavy lifting, so to speak. The easiest is to jump into is Tech. I mean, I'm kind of I speak too fast, I think too fast, and I'm probably I feel the most affiliation with him than all the other clones, I'm going to guess. So it's probably those. It's going to be Tech. He's the easiest to hop into.
And now we're going to go with Brian with Full of Sith.
Brian.
Hey, Dee. I'm curious. You've got a batch of clones that you took through the Clone Wars that all had a relationship with a young woman growing up with Ahsoka, and you've got these clones having this relationship with Omega. And I'm wondering if you can kind of talk about the differences they're having and how Omega is affecting the clones, the Bad Batch, but also your performance of them and how that works.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting parallel there. Each is a young, able young woman who is sort of steps into this as a highly able, competent child, and that comes to connect with and learn from and find agency in the adult world. And on the other end of that, you have the adult community that she's learning from and becoming part of, that learns from her, where she becomes her own kind of authority and teacher. It's particularly interesting to me how this plays out with Omega in season 2, where she's very forthcoming and very upfront with the emotional take that she has on something. If somebody leaves, for instance, because this is her family, this is her center of gravity. It's a moving center of gravity, but it's still her center of gravity. And a child is often immediately frustrated with a seemingly impossible situation or something that defies expectation. And yet a child has ability to pivot very quickly and to improvise a situation and to drop baggage. It's like a child can forgive very quickly. Grown-ups forgive very slowly, for instance. And so she comes into contact with this group that is very improvisational in their stance towards the universe and things that are coming at them. And she learns from that, but they also learn from her, because more and more they come to see that there's a wisdom in what the child brings and how she learns with an open heart. And I think that is transformational to all of them, to bring that more directly into focus, into how they relate to each other and how they see themselves and how they engage with the universe and the larger mythological superstructure of politics that's playing out in general. So to me, it's very interesting to see that dynamic in both of those series of the adults learning from the child, as well as the child learning from the adults.
Next, we're going to go to Sky Talkers, Caitlin, Charlotte.
Sky Talkers.
Yeah. Hi, Dee. So good to talk to you. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Great to talk to you.
You've voiced so many clones throughout the years.
Hey, that's my Lula.
Yeah, she's right.
Oh, Lula. Anyway, what's your question?
Well, what is it about these roles that still excites you after all these years?
These roles are so beautifully written, and the story that's playing out is such a detailed and recognizable human story. And the political forces that are playing out also is recognizable. And so this isn't fantasy to me. These are real things that are playing out in terms of how we deal with life and how we overcome ourselves and how we come to find agency in the world and with larger stories that are playing out around us. And that decision of whether to behave in a selfish manner or in a blind manner, or whether to engage and to pitch in and to help out and to make this world more fair. I mean, this is something that really comes online from childhood into being a grown-up, is what's fair? What's the thing that I should do? If I have choices, many choices, how am I going to apply that? And how does that pay out? And or does it pay off, And so what I'm saying is that the story that's playing out, it's exciting to be involved with this, with all of the hundreds of artists involved, because the stories are meaningful and they impact me. They're impactful in an emotional way that feels memorable and that I think about a lot and that mean a lot to me personally. And I know it does to the fans that I run into at the conventions at all, is people really pin their lives and their relationships and their family interactions. They frame it around this grander mythology that's playing out. I don't want to oversell it, but it means a lot to people for very good reasons. And I think they're going to see even more of that in a deeper and far more interesting and varied way coming up in season 2.
Hi, this is Vivian Lyra Blair, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
And next, we're going to go to James with Jedi News.
My question is that obviously with COVID behind us, were you able to go back into the studio and interact with Michelle and some of the other cast whilst you were doing the voices for season 2?
Yeah, we pivoted quickly to just exclusively remote collaborative creation when COVID hit. So we only did a couple of sessions up front in the first season in a studio, in a proper studio, and then all the rest was all recorded remotely. As it stands now, it's mostly all still remote, but they're testing the waters of getting back into a studio. I've done it a couple of times so far, but so far, like with COVID protocols with the union and with an abundance of caution on the corporate side, that it's not everybody back in the studio all the time. And I don't think that it probably will ever do that, because there are advantages in terms of efficiency to the remote collaboration model. That said, there are certain scripts that we have that when the cast is available, that if you can get those players together in the same space, face to face, then there's a little bit of advantage and a little bit of a bump in terms of the final result of that you finally get. So it's still mostly remote, a little bit back in studio, but not very much so far.
All right, and now we're going to Richard with Skywalking Through Neverland.
Hey, D.
Hey.
I love the light cycle background you have there.
Oh, I love your background too. That's awesome. I wanna check that out. That's super cool.
Well, come on over. I got some Kenner toys we'll play with.
Sounds like fun.
Now, Hunter has been a great father figure to Omega in season 1 and a great mentor. But what do you think will be the last piece of guidance he will give to her before they hypothetically part ways in the future in one way or another?
Well, I can't speak specifically in terms of how things will play out. But as I'm about to see, the final chapter of the direct parenting experience is to say goodbye to the butterfly and to let that butterfly fly. And to do so is heartbreaking, but it is the fulfillment of parenting. And so that's what has to, I think, at some point play out. So, I mean, I'm at the edge of the empty nest myself in my family. So these things feel very present to me.
Oh, thank you very much. May the clones be with you.
Yes, and you too, sir.
Next, we're going to Keith and Kerwin with Father Son Galaxy.
Hello, D. How are you?
Hello, doing great. Hey, did I see you guys at Yeah, I saw you at Celebration, right?
Yeah, we did the interview.
Yes, hello again. Hello again. Good to see you.
Hello. Can you do the record voice?
Yeah, that's not a question.
Voice. Yeah. Next question.
Yeah.
Okay.
But our real question is about Crosshair. So we know that he's working for the Empire and that they phase out the clothes at some point. So is he aware of the Empire's plan to get rid of the clothes or replace them with stormtroopers? Or does he think that he's too valuable for the Empire to replace him and that he's basically not going to be affected by their plan?
That's a very interesting question, because Crosshair has thrown in with the Empire, hasn't he? And yet now he has to see how the consequences of his choices play out in the larger scope of things.
So in terms of how that's going to play out, I mean, that's the interesting story that's been put into play, isn't it? Is that he's left his team, he's joined a larger team, and the question is, and that is dealt with very directly in the second season, is how does that play out? It's a very interesting question.
Thank you. We'll be sure to watch.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Watching for you as well.
All right. Next, we're going to Mark with Tarkin's Top Shelf.
Hello, D.
Hey,
long-time listener, first-time caller.
Hey.
My kids love it when I read to them out loud and do funny voices or serious voices. You know,
that's funny.
Looking at IMDb, you have over 650 acting credits. Like you're approaching Frank Welker territory here, including a puddle of goo in Star Trek Prodigy. So, as a desperate father trying to keep his children entertained, after all this time, how do you keep the process of finding new ways to use your voice interesting and fresh for yourself?
The way that I keep it fresh for myself is that I maintain things that I love to do that aren't acting. They're things that I just love. For instance, photographing insects, or playing the bass, or making my Halloween yard. If you want to check out my Halloween yard at creepyyard.com, you can, because I love creating Halloween yards and I love that holiday. And so for me, as a human being, but also as an artist, I think it's important that you keep these other fires, these other passions or interests or curiosities alive as you are soldiering through the grand project of being a dad or being an artist. Is that you have to you have to feed yourself the fuel that gives you the energy to push through these other larger missions that you're involved with. So that's the answer to me, is not to do the one thing, but to have other things that are also up and running and that sustain and feed your sense of enthusiasm and enjoyment in living.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed is that you never know where inspiration comes from. So thank you very much.
Right. Well, and the Bad Batch sees that very, very clearly. I mean, they learn that's sort of their a battle tactic for them, is this improvisational stance. And that's a lot of what Omega is learning too, is that it seems like you hit a brick wall, but if you stay open to it and you realize that you're in this together, that you will find a solution creatively together by just being open to the universe, to how this is going, and that you don't stop. And that's true whether you're a member of the Bad Batch or running a family or just living your life. Is this kind of improvisational stance it's a really useful stance, I think, towards living in general.
All right. And Mark with Fantha Tracks, you have time for another question.
Dee, as animation gets more cinematic, as visuals get better, as music cues change, as all the elements of it become more, waggling the air quotes, real, does that affect or does that change the way you perform a character? Let's say if you were doing the Bad Batch 15 years ago to that animation compared to where it is now, it's so cinematic and beautiful. Does it make any difference to what you do?
Ultimately, from the Clone Wars forward, with the television animated Star Wars, that it was always made as cinema for television, and the people making it were the people that made the cinema versions of Star Wars, and so it was always approaching that tone and that realism. And it's in season 2. I mean, it's really remarkable. You can go through and watch it and just say, okay, I'm just going to pay attention to the lighting in this show, or I'm just going to pay attention to the music and the musical motifs that are woven in. I mean, it's as sophisticated as the best feature film that you could possibly wish to see, and the show has always had that intent and that tone to me. So to me, we may have relaxed into our characters more, but that's more a function of just being used to telling these stories. But the stories were always told from a very cinematic point of view in terms of how it was lit and how the music was applied, the visual references, the angles, the shots, the way that it's blocked out. It's very cinematic, and often you can go through it and say, oh, that's Hitchcock. Oh, that's Kurosawa right there. That's a Spielberg scene. And you can see it very directly, how they weave in the history of cinema into what is effectively a weekly cinematic experience in the Bad Batch and the Clone Wars series.
I'm Anthony Daniels, and you are listening to Fantha Tracks. Well done.
Sarah, if you'd like to kick us off with the first question, you can go for it.
Hey there. Thank you so much for joining us. We are Richard and Sarah from Skywalking Through Neverland.
And we have a music question for you guys because Kevin Kiner is just amazing. And in season 1, he had this great innocent theme for Omega. But now that Omega is growing up in season 2, what was the direction you gave Kevin Kiner for her theme? And maybe can you talk about any other themes we can look forward to in season 2?
Ooh, we could spend this whole time talking about Kevin Kiner and all of Team Kiner, Dean and Sean as well, his son. They're so great. Yeah, Omega's theme is so beautiful. And if you listen carefully, you'll hear it in different versions throughout season 2, depending on the situation. I'll just say, because I don't want to take up all the time, watch out for episode 3 coming out pretty quick in season 2. The music is incredible. And, speaking of the direction to the Kiners, it's really a collaboration. When we do music spotting, I tell them these are the moods we're going for, and they always have thoughts. They're so good. They're the best.
And Brian, you can take the next question.
I asked a version of this, I think, last time we talked for season 1, and I'm wondering how it's changed as you look to season 2. There's always a lot of like movie reference that happens and gets thrown around, and I'm wondering what sort of movie references, as far as structure or inspiration, we could be looking forward to as we head into season 2 from the writing room.
I mean, we're constantly talking about inspiration from, Indiana Jones to Goonies to, again, I don't want to spoil where we're going, but there's also like a monster type movie vibe. It's sort of when you get all of us in a room together, we're all such different individuals, and we draw inspiration from various films and television that it's a great, exploration into what creative content we all enjoy and how we can put that into each of our episodes and really make them pop in a Star Wars vibe.
And Caitlin, you can take the next question.
It'll actually be me, Charlotte. But hi, I'm Charlotte from Sky Talkers. In season 1, some of the themes of the season we loved were personal choice and perseverance. What themes were you interested in exploring in season 2?
Well, I'd say the word that I use for season 2 is crossroads, and that is what several of our characters come to in season 2, and we explore sort of the changing dynamic between the Batch and the Empire, but also the internal dynamic within the Bad Batch and how that evolves as, more pressure is put on them and as, the Empire is continuing to rise to power.
Hi, this is Andy Seacombe, otherwise known as Watto, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
And James, you can take the next question.
Where have the Bad Batch grown? How do you see all of the characters have grown between season 1 and how we see them in season 2?
They've definitely grown and they've become different. They've been through a lot. Visually, we wanted to show that some time has passed. Omega's a little older, her hair's a little longer. The Batch themselves, armor is all dented up and beat up. The padding under their armor has had to be replaced probably several times as they've been through countless things. We wanted to show them more threadbare, not living the greatest life, living gig to gig. Was part of what Jen was saying about this crossroads. Like, what are they going to do next is something that we get into. And of course, somewhere they scrounged up enough money to buy Omega a new outfit so she wouldn't be wearing pajamas for her whole life. And she has a little hat with some metal armor on it. We just wanted to show that this team has become even more of a family, even more close knit is a big deal.
Thank you. And Tricia, you can take the next question.
Obviously, some of the clones still have their chips, and they're functionally younger than Omega when Order 66 happened. Does having more information and wisdom change how the chips are going to affect the clones?
I think with what we're exploring with the chips is that, it's once the clones have committed Order 66, it's, at least with the Batch, obviously their chips were a little degraded because they're considered genetically, mutations of clones. So it didn't fully work. And, Crosshair obviously had his removed later on, but not all clones are the same, and how others are reacting to not just the chip, but what they've done and who's more aware of of the actions they've committed, and also like as time progresses, what that means for them as they're looking at their involvement within the Empire.
And Father Son Galaxy, Keith or Kerwin, you can ask the next question.
So in season 1, Hunter was the father figure for Omega, and he made sure to keep her safe from harm. But now we see in season 2 that Omega is a little older and more wiser. So can you tell us a little bit about Hunter and Omega's relationship in season 2? Does Hunter feel Omega's capable of taking care of herself now, or is he still like her father figure?
Yeah, we explore all of that. It's a really great question. Hunter, as a father, and myself as a father as well, and your dad probably feels the same way. Sometimes you make great decisions, sometimes you don't. We have to deal with all of that with this family unit. And seeing, we definitely have moments where Hunter realizes Omega needs to make her own decision, and she actually will tell him that. We've tried to explore all of the facets of this family, and then also as a unit, you could see Omega right away in the first episode that she's grown, she's more capable, she's doing all these amazing things. She still has a lot to learn, and we show her learning many things through the season.
And Becca, you can ask the next one.
Sorry, was very unprepared. I thought Mark was going to go in my stead.
Yeah, but I actually am ready to go.
Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, yeah. So this is like a combined question from both Becca and I for Jennifer. So how did your tenure on NCIS as a writer and co-executive producer translate into executive producing on The Bad Batch? As a woman writing, how exciting and important is this for you to be in charge or leading the charge of something in Star Wars that's usually been male dominated? And this show, you might argue, is female led with Omega, or Omega, as she might say, even if it's mostly, the 4 guys watching her 4 dads. So how do you go about fashioning her to fit as an adolescent girl in the middle of a war with middle-aged men? So there's a lot to unpack there. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a big question. Well, I think my time at NCIS was aided by the fact that I was in the military. So I think that's what helped me sort of understand these stories and focus on the characters and what the predicament that they're in. What I loved about The Bad Batch and when I got the opportunity to develop The Bad Batch with Dave Filoni was that I responded to the military squad and the idea of having them be a guardian to this young girl. A lot of that dynamic stemmed from not only my time in the military, but also I have 3 older brothers. And growing up, they were like my idols. And I just, wanted to play hockey with them and like always wanted to kind of tag along. And whether they wanted to or not, I just sort of inserted myself into their lives. But being a female head writer, for Star Wars is, I'm honored to do this, but I'll say it's very much a collaborative effort, and I couldn't have done it without Brad. We are very much like a tag team when it comes to this series, and we are guided every step of the way with Dave Filoni, who's been such a great mentor to us. But we take it very seriously, writing these stories and making these stories, and it's an honor to be part of the Star Wars universe and just tell stories we're passionate about. And I hope with Omega, it's just exploring a dark time in the galaxy, but seen through the lens of a child who is learning all about what it means to be a person and to sort of choose to help people, even when, there's a lot of risk involved, because that's what you do when someone's in need, which, hopefully that is a lesson to take away for our world today.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
All right, and next up, I'll be asking you guys a question on behalf of an outlet called Fantha Tracks. So, with the explosion in popularity of live-action Star Wars and with the animated space having such an important role in the wider story, how do you guys make sure that what you do is seen by the wider audience and remains an essential element of the whole Star Wars story?
I'll jump in there. I'd say we love all the live action series. We're big fans of everything they're doing for our, in our arena. We just try to tell the best stories we can. We don't worry about trying to say like, how are we going to wow someone? How are we going to make such a big headline that we draw all of the audience to us? We're just trying to be true to these characters and tell their stories. Like Jen, you were just saying, Omega, as she grows up, and what decisions are she going to make? We talk more about that, really. And if we're doing our jobs right, I think that's the way to do it. And if it turns out good, then hopefully the fans will come and check it out,
And then back to you, Sarah and Richard. You can ask the next question.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank you for hiring my favorite comedian of all time, Wanda Sykes. I am so excited about this. So can you tell us about working with Miss Sykes and a little about her character?
Yeah, Wanda is so cool. She's so funny. She's so good. And we always, even regardless of how her character's written on the page, when we're with her in the booth, she'll have ideas, for tweaks of lines or how to bring a certain swagger to the role, which is that's really the fun thing, to see how she reacts off of our main characters. It's a joy and a pleasure to work with her.
And she plays Fee Genoa, who's a sort of a we call her the liberator of ancient wonders, which is her definition for smuggler / pirate. But she's a friend of Sid's, and Wanda's such a delight to work with, and we're excited about the fans seeing this character.
Thank you, and thank you once again for bringing her on the team.
And Brian, you can take the next question.
I want to ask, you mentioned a little bit that Dave Filoni kind of, has his influence on everything that you're doing. And I'm wondering, like, what is that day-to-day sort of influence, and what sort of guidance has he given you for season 2 that you could share with us?
I mean, usually Dave hears the stories that are percolating in our brains as we're getting ready to go into story conferences. We'll talk to him about, the next group of episodes, but also, we had discussions on season 2 and where we'd like to go, and certain tentpole episodes that were of, key interest to us. And, he provides guidance and input throughout the whole process, in terms of, like, before these episodes even get broken, to the draft phase, to even later on when it's animated. So, he's there to, make sure that if making sure it's the best version, and asking us the important questions, and making sure that we're, hitting everything and bringing everything to the level that it should be.
Yeah, he gives us notes at various phases of our previs process and our full animation process. And sometimes they hurt, sometimes those hurt, but they're always, he's so smart. He's so good. And his influence is literally across the whole show.
Especially when we have characters from, that are introduced that, may have been from different shows, movies. We want to make sure that we're all on the same page about what's happening there.
And up next, we have Sky Talkers. So Charlotte or Caitlin, you can ask the next question.
Hi, I'm Caitlin, the other half of Sky Talkers. It's so nice to talk to you both today. My question is, visually, this season looks very different from season 1 already. How does the look and feel for season 2? How has it evolved?
Yeah, I mean, essentially it's the same style, but we're always looking at technology and other older fashioned Hollywood techniques to push the style. How can we take this existing style and push the nuance and the fidelity? For example, in the trailer, in the first episode, we're on this island planet, and the way that the water reflects the light, the way that then influences the characters, where they might be running from giant crabs. It's in the trailer. Check it out. So fun. Is a thing we looked at. We've been implementing a lot more matte paintings this season as well. So not just the CGI technology, but the old fashioned ILM influence it really helps us make a huge jump in the scope and scale of the series. So yeah, we talk about that all the time, constantly pushing.
Hi, this is Gareth Edwards, director of the best standalone Star Wars film since Caravan of Courage, called Rogue One. You're listening to Fantha Tracks. Enjoy.
And James, you can take the next question.
How have the stories evolved in season 2? Because obviously we're getting a 2-parter at the start, a two-parter in the middle and a two-parter at the end. So is that to take us on a particular journey? Why was that decision made?
Yeah. I mean, it's very intentional as to why we're grouping these episodes together. And, it was important to us in season 2 to continue to tell fantastical adventure stories, but also thread in the element of the growing threat of the Empire, but also other groups that have sort of, I guess, taken hints from the Empire and are also doing oppressive things and having the batch interact with various, parties throughout the galaxy. But we wanted, those are sort of the two-parters are very, I guess, tent-pole-ish type episodes of where we're leading. So yes, it was very intentional.
And Trisha, you can take the next question.
Can you talk about bringing Gunji into the season?
Ooh, yeah. Very, very fun. And he's quite a character. Seeing Gunji with Omega in particular brings lots of joy to my life. Hopefully to all of you as well when you see it. We love Gunji.
Yeah, we. I'm trying to remember specifically how the evolution of that happened, but I think the way we pitched it was that we wanted through season 2, it's other people that they've come into contact with, right, that need assistance and need help, and the idea of a Jedi youngling having survived but having no support system, and the opportunity to pair him with Omega, like Brad was saying, was just, she rarely gets to hang out with kids, which is why we loved the Hera episodes last year. But Gunji's a very different individual, and I'm pretty sure that was a Dave Filoni suggestion of
100%.
who that youngling or that Padawan could be, and we were thrilled to bring him back because we're all massive fans.
And for the final question, Kerwin or Keith, bring us home, fellas.
Thank you. So it seems that the batch is still working for Sid, and they're taking on missions just to earn a living. But Echo's been saying for a very long time that they should be doing more.
But they need to get involved in the fight.
Yes. So I'm wondering if these two thoughts that they're having on the same team, will this cause a conflict with the team?
A great divide.
Yeah, we specifically get into that in a few episodes and see how that difference of opinion grows and what that leads to, and how that affects the team and the family is a really interesting thing. It's a great question. It's something we were talking about. We wanted to make sure that Echo had a little bit more time in the spotlight this season for sure, because we love Echo so much, and what he does this season is pretty great.
And the conflict, between them and the difference of opinions and what they should be doing does affect sort of, how they view their working relationship with Sid. And is this really the best choice for them, as other things are really taking place. So everything's very connected for that in season 2.
I'm Neil deGrasse Tyson, and you are following Fantha Tracks.
Becca and Mark.
Oh, wow. Hi, I'm first. Always nerve-wracking. Hi. So I'm Becca from Tarkin's Top Shelf. So I have a question for you. First of all, I love the character. Jennifer earlier spoke of Crossroads for this season. So I have to ask, and I've been wondering, is this something Omega will tackle personally, as in Crossroads? Like the growth level, leaving adolescence behind, childish things behind, and how will that affect her? And that said, what's the difference between her now in this season versus where we left her behind in season 1?
Thanks, Becca. I think you've sort of hit the nail on the head. We have a time jump, and in season 1, she was very much a naive youth. She'd never left Camino. So the physical wonder of, being on different planets and the physical world was sort of what really amazed her. I think what we kind of move into for season 2 for Omega is this awareness of deeper themes of politics, of meeting communities and people who have a lifestyle that feels intrinsically unjust or unfair to her, and sort of she starts to investigate that. we also have, mentors that she comes across who have different views about like what the mercenary life means. And I think overall it's this idea of identity, like who is she, who are the batch, and how do they choose to, now that they're free, how do they choose to spend their existence, and can they and should they advocate for a cause, or do they have a right just to exist and enjoy life and not be on missions, either their own or someone else's.
All right. And next we'll be moving to Sarah and Richard.
Hey there, Michelle. Thanks for joining us. I am Richard. This is Sarah from Skywalking Through Neverland.
And we would love to know about your performance as Omega. Can you take us through the process of aging up Omega for season 2 with your vocal performance?
Oh, thank you. That's an interesting question. So it's more that obviously for season 1, I had to work much harder to sound younger. Season 2 is almost in some ways easier to be a little bit older because it's closer to my own natural state. And it's really just like I sort of said, is the childlike wonder is tempered down a bit. And season 2, I feel, is a little bit emotionally darker and more challenging. So I think just because of the emotional stakes that we see Omega go through, the viewers and my performance was sort of, it was really easy to lean into like making her feel a little bit older because of the emotional stakes that our story takes her through this season.
All right. And next we'll be moving to Trisha.
Hi, I'm Trisha Barr from Fangirls Going Rogue. We've followed the animation process for a long time, and I know that every show is a little different. What's the recording like? Who's in the room with you when you're recording, and how does that go?
Hi, Trisha. That's a really fun question. I'm in New Zealand. I record in New Zealand, literally in my little studio in my house. So I am 100% by myself. And I get to zoom into LA and San Francisco. Our team is kind of spread between those two places. And I'm not 100% sure of the animation process, because a lot of the times when we do our record, I just have a script and a director and possibly my co-stars, my co-voice actors. But then when we do pickups, the animation and the recording process has converged a little bit more. So it's always exciting on pickup record because we get a little glimpse of the animatics, often, nowhere near finished. But that's when you really sort of see the direction and the mind's eye of the director bringing the vocal performance and layering it with, the animation beats. But really, in terms of what I do, I kind of work solely in the audio space until the very, very end. But they also record me, I think. I have to record my face, and it's weird. Sometimes it's 6 a.m. in the morning, and I'm like, oh, I pity the person who has to watch this video. But I think sometimes they might take some of my mannerisms and work that into their ideas for Omega.
All right. And next we are moving to Brian with Full of Sith.
Hey, I've got sort of a 2-part question. I'm wondering how the Bad Batch have influenced Omega as she's moving into season 2, but also like in a real world situation, like how has D. Bradley Baker influenced or mentored you as a voice actor in parallel with that?
Cool. Thanks, Brian. Obviously the Bad Batch brothers, I think I'd like to think that Omega and her brothers are on a more even playing field. I think you'll really sense that. It's not like she is trying to ingratiate herself to them anymore. And in some instances, we see that she has potentially a better insight into a situation, perhaps, than her experienced brothers. What I love about season 2 is that we'll get to explore more specific dynamics between Omega and each of her brothers, the individual personalities of them, and how Omega interacts with that is quite special. And obviously Hunter and Wrecker had really wonderful arcs in season 1, but Echo and Ted, we get a deeper sense of how Omega interacts with each of her brothers. And then with D, I'm sure you guys all know he's an incredible actor and very experienced and also incredibly generous. The fact that we live in different countries means that we don't often get to physically connect, but we got to meet in Celebration, I think, for the second time in person. And he was there then, and he was, very generous. And mostly, I think, he's a shining beacon for how to, he loves his job, and he loves all of you guys and the fan base. And I think I was a little bit nervous because I haven't really been a part of a big family like this. And he was just a very reassuring friend. And I ask him for most of the advice he gives me is sort of just how to calm my nerves before doing things like this, or like how to navigate my way through press stuff, because that stuff is completely new to me.
Hi, this is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
And next we're moving to James with Jedi News.
I wanted to ask you about your new costume. You've got a brand new costume. You finally got rid of those pajamas. How did that feel? And can you talk us through when you first saw that costume and how you felt about, your new hat as well? Just talk us through that process if you can.
Thanks, James. Thanks for being so reassuring. That's kind of you. So we only get the scripts like literally a couple of days before we record. But Brad, our director, had prefaced that there would be a change. I think I probably only saw the new outfit, maybe during pickups of like the first episode. So I would have done the recording before I understood exactly the new visual. But it makes sense, right? She's getting
growing up.
Pretty dangerous. Yeah, she's growing up. I feel like it's sensible to have a little bit more protection. And I think it's really just this visual indicator, like I mentioned, that she is absolutely comfortable and competent in this batch, in this squad. And is her love for adventure and missions, and she sort of wears it as comfortably as she would wear her Camino pajamas. So it's not a bulky unusual thing for her. I think, we see her move in it, and it feels like it belongs to her. So it's sort of cementing her identity in the squad as someone who's ready for action. I was excited to see like her having a little bit of longer hair and the helmet. She looks older to me, in a way that makes sense because of, the missions that they're now going on.
And next we'll be moving to Charlotte and Caitlin.
Hi, Michelle. I'm Caitlin from Sky Talkers. So nice to talk to you today. My question is, one of my favorite parts of season 1 was the relationship between Omega and Crosshair, actually. And I loved how Omega had hope for Crosshair at different points in season 1. Do you think she still has hope for him throughout season 2?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Omega is very aware of each of her brothers, and as much as Crosshair and the Batch are now in, their story paths are quite separate. I have no doubt that Omega absolutely thinks of him as family, and Omega has a very sort of clear mission in terms of what she wants her family to look and feel like. So Crosshair is not someone that Omega will have forgotten about at all.
All right. And next we'll be moving to Kerwin and Keith.
So we have a question about Omega's role in the Bad Batch. So as much as it is a story about the dismantling of the clones by the Empire, it's also more of a coming-of-age story about Omega. And now that she's older and wiser, how does she feel about her role in the team and what's she learning about herself and her force-sensitive abilities?
Well, to the second thing, I don't think she doesn't think of herself as that at all. She is a curious and empathetic soul, and I think what is dawning for Omega throughout season 2 is how passionate and aware she is that her and her brothers, especially I think in the first half of the season, how there isn't really much advocating for them as their own race or, beings in their own right. They're sort of very much considered assets or pawns that are being commandeered by various groups. And so it's really interesting to see Omega, because she has a strong sense of identity, of family, of the fact that all the clones are her brothers, but also because she's so naive to politics and war. She has this very pure and unbridled passion to ensure that they, as a race, are protected and heard and valued. And I think we'll really get to see what that means to her and how she can apply herself to protecting her family.
Hi, this is Guy Henry, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks. Enjoy.
Mark with Fantha Tracks could not be here for this roundtable, but I will be reading his question for you. Omega made such a huge impact during season 1. People totally fell in love with her. So coming into season 2, where do you stand with, first, your relationship to an older, more savvy Omega, and second, the fandom who have taken you into their hearts in such a strong way?
An older and more savvy Omega. Well, I think I mentioned before that season 2 has some sort of darker and more themes that potentially have quite high stakes, and it was really delicious, especially as an actor and voice actor, to play out scenes or interactions that emotionally went to scarier, deeper, more unsettled places. So as a creative, I really enjoyed giving that sort of extra emotional dimension to Omega and being allowed to have very emotional scenes. And in terms of the fandom, I am, like I mentioned, I still get a little bit nervous. It just feels so big. But after having met many of you at Celebration this year, which was my first convention, it's just so heartwarming. I love understanding like how much Star Wars has been a part of not just like an individual, but potentially, like their family. It seems very intergenerational. It also, across genders. And I one thing that blew me away at Celebration was just this like unbridled sense of acceptance of everyone's individual entry into Star Wars. So as someone like who's new, I just feel like even though I'm new, everyone's been very generous and kind, and it's a good community to be a part of. So thank you.
All right, and Becca and Mark, you have time for another question.
Hi, Mark from Tarkin's Top Shelf. So D. Bradley Baker has been the one-man clone show for a decade and a half now, which is hard to believe. So how did you approach an established character type that he has inhabited for so long and create a new character that is a unique individual in her own right? And how did you find a way to play that character that showed the right balance of innocence and intelligence?
Thanks. Gosh, I had no idea that it was actually that long, but it's not surprising. He is incredibly comfortable and fluid in finding different voices for essentially the same character. As for myself, I think the fact that Omega is a young girl clone did liberate me quite a lot from having to sort of like pick up where Dee had created. I also have the added lucky bonus that I am naturally gifted with the New Zealand accent, so I think I didn't have to work quite as hard as Dee is like getting the accent right. And in terms of innocence and intelligence, I have to just take my hat off to the writers. I think the writing in Bad Batch is extremely well considered. They're also very generous as well. If when we're doing a record, if a line sort of comes across too adult, it sort of is immediately apparent, when I'm reading, I'm like, I feel like she wouldn't describe the feeling in this way, or this word feels perhaps too mature for her to use. Those kinds of things sometimes come up in recordings, and our writer, or Jen, our head writer, is often on the recording. So they're very generous in being able to work with me to find something that fits better. But really, it's just the deliciousness of voice acting, where they create a story and a scene and a world, and then when I record it, I imagine that I'm there. And I guess just the natural instinct for how I would say something with my imagination coupled together comes. That's what breathes life into Omega, and I'm glad that you think that it's working.
Sarah and Richard, you have time for another question?
Oh, great. How would Omega, in her own voice and her point of view, how would she describe season 2 using the Omega voice?
Using the Omega voice. Do you mean like looking back, knowing everything that's happened?
Yes, from her point of view.
Good question. I think from her point of view, it would be like, if there was a catchphrase, it would be like, don't worry about me. I'm gonna be fine. Let's do this for our family. I think she has, without giving away any spoilers, she has this incredible bravery in the face of something that will literally rip apart their family, and she is not fearful because she knows that she wants to contribute to the greater cause.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great answer.
Thanks for listening to Making Tracks. If you want to be a part of the action and stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news, visit fanthatracks.com or check out the free Fantha Tracks app for the App Store to follow us on your mobile device. You can reach out to us and send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@fanthatracks.com. Comment, like and share on any of our social media feeds at Fantha Tracks, and be sure to subscribe, leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. And as always, thanks to James Semple for composing the Fantha Tracks intro, Adam O'Brien for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. Remember, tune in to Good Morning Tatooine. It's live Sunday evenings at 9 o'clock UK, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific on Facebook and YouTube. And check out our Fantha Tracks Radio Friday night rotation every Friday night at 7 p.m. UK time for new episodes of The Fantha from Down Under, Planet Leia, Desert Planet Discs, Start Your Engines, Collecting Tracks, Cannon Fodder, and special episodes of Making Tracks. And that's me done for this episode.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's Collecting Tracks.
The Knights of the Round Table